I'm going to be switching gears for this one. Not going to be talking about Unity or multiplayer functionality. I'm actually going to be talking about acoustic panels, specifically how to use a custom image or graphic to use as the fabric wrap that goes around the panel. So this isn't going to be a step-by-step tutorial, just a review of the process of how I was able to print the image on the fabric, and a little bit of a breakdown of the costs involved and some things I learned along the way. And just to give you a little backstory, I was actually in the middle of trying to order some sound panels, and it just seemed like the prices were a little high for what I was looking for. I was targeting the 2x4 foot panel, 4-inch thick. There were some 2-inch options, but I really wanted to have that extra sound absorption with the 4-inch one. And most of these panels were limited to a single color, didn't really have a lot of texture options. And when you wanted to use a custom image, whether it was some stock photo or one you provided, those prices did seem to increase pretty quickly. So at that point, I was wondering whether or not this is something I can do on my own. So I looked into some YouTube DIYers, and of course there were a bunch of videos on this, and I found one in particular that I really liked. I'm going to link it below in the description. It was a very minimal amount of tools and materials, and I really liked that. Some of these videos were really complicated, but the one I'm going to link below was very good, and I highly recommend it. The first few that I made, I used a basic cotton sheeting from Joann Fabrics. It's a really good quality material. It's not going to flex or stretch too much. It's easy to work with, and it's very durable. And then they have like hundreds of different textures and styles that you can choose from. So really that's a good cheap option to use. The single colored fabrics or the textured ones do look nice. There's a ton of options. You can definitely find something that works. But I was thinking there's got to be some nice images that you could print out on a fabric and use that instead. And it would probably pop a lot more. So I decided to look into some online stores that would do custom graphic printing on fabric. And I'm sure there's a couple out there, but I found one that seemed like a really good reputable site, and I'll link them in the description, so please check it out. They had a ton of different fabric types to choose from. You can even order a little sample pack that they'll send you for like $5. It's definitely worth it if you're really particular about the type of fabric that you want to use. And I know there's a ton of research out there that you can look into about what's the best fabric type to use on acoustic panels, but I know cotton is a pretty good middle of the road selection, so that's what I went with. And the fabric type I ended up going with was called Silhouette Cotton Sateen, not satin, sateen. Now this material works pretty good. There's probably some better options, so you may want to order that sample pack and kind of look at the different fabrics they have just to be sure. One thing I wanted to point out about the custom fabric print is that it wasn't as durable as the cotton sheeting that I got from Joann Fabrics. It was more susceptible to scuffing on the edge if you had dragged it on something, so just be careful. And again, I'll link that sample pack down in the description. I ended up pulling an image off Unsplash that I thought looked really nice, and this was like an experimental phase, so I knew that I was taking a risk either way, so I just grabbed something quick that I liked. The image resolution that I found was 4096 by 2733, and then the fabric that I used to print was 60 inches by 34 inches. So when you're picking out your image, kind of make sure it's in a similar scale as the ones that I used. I mean, the higher resolution, the better. And then some of these websites, you can actually check to see what their recommendations are for resolutions. So definitely check that out. So I just got the printed fabric here. I got the build complete. So let's check it out. So if you like how that looks, just imagine whatever custom image that you want to add to that. And you can always do a portrait mode versus the landscape one that I did. So really the possibilities are limitless here. So I wanted to touch on the cost a little bit. It was a really big factor when I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to order this online or do it myself. So the base materials, which was 2 1x4s, 1 1x3, and I also bought these little rubber feet that I'll talk about later for the backing, was only about $35. I actually have the screws that they recommended in the reference video, so that's an extra $10, so I guess $45 for the base materials that you would need, not including the fabric. Now, if you're looking for fabric costs, let's say you go to Joann Fabrics, I think it was about $15 for one panel's worth of fabric. Now, if you compare that to the cost of the custom image fabric, that was about $75 shipped. So that's a $50 difference in fabric that you're gonna spend. So you're looking at a cost between $110 and $120 for one panel. I didn't see too many online stores that would sell you a 4x2 foot panel at 4 inches thick at that cost. They were usually starting at around $200. So right there you might think, well, it's just cheaper to do it myself, but you have to consider the tools here. If you don't have the tools and you're going to go out and try to buy them, you're probably going to spend anywhere from $180 to $250 on tools. So let's say, for example, you spend $200 in tools, and then you turn around and you spend $120 on materials to actually put it together. That's what, $320 right there. That's pretty steep. However, if you start looking at the costs of what these online stores are charging, they're anywhere from $225 to $300 or more, depending on what options you select. So if you have a couple of these tools and maybe you only need to spend $50, well then your initial investment becomes a lot lower. So I think you really have to think about how much do you have already and how much you're going to need to buy versus what you're going to just spend getting it directly from an online retailer. Plus you have to consider tax and shipping as well on top of those costs. Now, where it really starts to get good is if you plan on making more than one. If you're going to make one, you might as well just order it offline and be done with it. But if you're going to make, say, 3 or more, things start getting really good to do it yourself. You can start reusing some of the wood on other projects. Like I think if you buy one more 1x4, you can actually create 2 panels out of that. So let's say worst case scenario, you buy the materials for 3 soundboards at $110 each. You're looking at about $330 for 3 acoustic panels. Now, if you were to order these custom image panels offline at the same size, you're looking at upwards of $250 each. So if you order 3 of those, you're looking at $750 versus the $530 that you would spend doing it yourself. So again, if you don't have the tools, but you plan on making at least 3, it's almost worth it to go out and buy the tools. But if you're only going to order one, you may just want to grab it off one of the online retailers. If you plan on watching the DIY video that I referenced to build these, I think they say that the top and bottom boards are going to be 24.5 inches. Well, the board that you're left with ends up not being quite that. It's just short of that. Whatever it ends up being, don't worry about it. Just cut that leftover chunk in half and that will be your top and bottom pieces. And if you're not sure how to cut those 45-degree angles, you can always spring for a miter box and a hacksaw. It's going to put you back maybe $30-40. Or you can strategically clamp some guide boards together to give you that 45-degree angle. And make sure to hold off on cutting the center support backing board because the actual frame itself, once you put it together, may be a little different from what you expected. So once you have the frame together, take the inside measurement and then just cut it to that exact measurement. This backing fabric was purchased at Jo-Ann Fabrics. It's actually pretty good quality and it's very cheap. I think it was about $6 or $7 for 5 panels worth of fabric. The width dimension is 48 inches, which kind of works perfectly for the size of these panels. You'll be able to stretch it out to almost a perfect fit and then just staple along the backing edge. Now there is one minor drawback I think to stapling the backing fabric to the outer edge versus pulling it over and stapling it into the side. It creates this little artifact here that makes it look like the fabric's getting pulled in. So if you're really concerned about that, pull the fabric down over to the side and staple it into the side of the board. Yeah, you are going to waste a little bit of your fabric doing it that way, but if you're more concerned about aesthetics, you may want to go that route. The fabric comes pretty wrinkled when you get it in the mail, so just make sure to flip it over and give it a gentle iron to try to get out all those extra creases. One little aesthetic improvement I found when you're stapling the fabric wrap to the back is to fold it under itself right before stapling, and that way you'll have a nice smooth edge the whole way around. I picked up these little rubber leg tips that I found to act as spacers to keep the panels off the wall. I just centered them on the 45-degree support pieces on the back. They're really easy to work with and they're fairly inexpensive. They sell them in 1 inch and 3/4 inch sizes. And here's what they look like when they're attached to the board. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks for watching.